Hello, everyone. So glad that you could join us. Today, we're going to be speaking about Uranus, innovation, and evolution. It is the second emanation on the tree of life going down. Right after Neptune, it is traditionally associated with the Sephirot of Chokmah, which translates to wisdom. From Hebrew, it is the mystical Kabbalah of the Judaism, of the Jewish faith, and it would be once again called Chokmah. But according to our modern interpretation, it is Uranus, and it regards innovation and evolution, a very specific kind of wisdom actually that develops over time. Just very quickly, our apologies for not being able to have the session at the prescribed time for the day. Unfortunately, some matters came up that we had to tend to, and now that they have been tended to, we are getting an opportunity to record this. As you know, will be posted along with all the other videos in our course on the YouTube website that is linked to the flyer that you receive every week. You will be receiving for the rest of the time that we have this class going on. Let's get started. So, as an introduction, once again, we consider some advantages in our lives according to what we're able to develop scientifically and technologically in this domain. If there's anything that characterizes it, it's these specific aspects of what we could end up developing as the human race. So first, omnipresence. There's also omniscience, omnifluence, or omnifluence, omnipotence. There is extra dimensional travel, interdimensional travel, teleportation, advanced capabilities and capacities. I mean, you could think of X-Men, genetic modification, time travel, reality bending. I mean, really, when you think of like science and technology and like what we're able to do together in the modern age, but also how we're going to move on to the next stage of our evolution, right? And what the final stage of our evolution actually looks like in terms of the human race or even just organic life here on planet Earth. What does that look like? What is the maximal state of life, indeed? So that's just kind of like the basic aspects, right? And then we move on to the essentials and the fundamentals, right? So, like I mentioned, every single one of these spheres have an archangel. They are associated with celestial correspondences. So the archangel for this particular sphere is Raziel. They are well known for like keeping secrets. So like they're the secret keepers, not in the sense of like occulting information, but rather just kind of like to the work of your own power. So they reveal kind of like the inner mechanics of how things actually work. And Of course, they make sure that you kind of move within a shroud of privacy, that your productions aren't interrupted by other beings. So the order here is Alphanim or Alphanim. This is the celestial order, the types, the specific category of angels that are associated with Chokmah or Uranus, or sorry, Uranus. So the avium, once again, we talked about the avium last time. Think of an eon being 1,000 years. Well, an avium is like a perfect amount of. It's the moment. It's a perfect moment that goes on forever. It's an eternal moment. All things have come to pass in this moment, and things are happening exactly as they have always been meant to happen. It's paradisical. It's heavenly. It's nirvana. So immanence. This particular type regards knowledge. It's the avium that regards knowledge. Also, immanence is that of which is immediately made visible or real or manifest here through this sphere is polarization. Once again, we are talking about light, the kind of different aspects or powers that light might have in its manifestation. Here, aspects are polarized. So you get to see all of the differentiations, right? So the eminence, as we mentioned, is Chokmah, wisdom. The sphere is Uranus, phase four, which is to say that this is associated with the number four in numerology. It's like the fourth oscillation or the fourth revolution or the four states of matter, right? The four basic states of matter, essentially. Etc. So the eon here, which we'll say is like 1,000 years of like say God's time, reflects Aquarius in the north and Leo in the south in terms of where our like zodiac is associated or where it holds, right, in regards to this particular sphere. Eon in terms of like 1,000 years of measured time, not aligned with the heavens, but more or less aligned with the Earth actually. is the tiger of Eastern astrology, specifically Chinese. They are associated with spiritual mastery, so kind of like spiritual balance, actually, like the yin and the yang, right? So the aurum or the give, the color that the radiation that bleeds through what you perceive here is celestial blue. So if you look up at the sky and you see what it is, you're looking at it. You're looking at Uranus. That's kind of like what they do for us. They clarify this aspect, right? So the element here is uranium, highly radioactive. The seed is the endocrine system. Pretty much every hormone, pheromone you'll ever produce. I mean, it comes from there. The flower is the electric blue delphinium. Prophetic to a certain nature, but here we actually just make this correspondence because of the color association. You are free to choose whatever flower you believe makes sense to you. The fruit as well. We choose ibogaine because Chokmah, Uranus have been traditionally associated with the father, and ibogaine is like the father of the different hallucinogenic compounds that shamans use to travel or gain wisdom. Um, Another note on that, for our purposes, we associate uh, Chokmah or Uranus or this particular sphere with our grandmother, actually, if we're looking at a modern interpretation of what they mean, right? So the tree is ginkgo. That is a tree that comes from, well, I mean, it's the most famous tree in China, right? And so here again, you can kind of choose your own tree. We're choosing something based on the cultural association, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The animal's a white elk, very relative for our, native spirituality. All of the animals that I've chosen along those lines point out to that native spirituality. It's kind of like totems that we could think about, like when we think about the majesty or the magic of each sphere. You can choose your own. I just thought these made the most sense when I chose them. The tribe, the Jewish tribe that's reflected here is Naphtali. Going back to the angels, once again, never forget that there's an entire line of wisdom that's connected from ancient Egypt through Judaism, through Hermeticism, through Thelema, and now into modern like astrology and New Age kind of correspondences, right? So the apostle is Bartholomew or Nathaniel, that is the apostle of Christ. The virtue here is freedom, and the vices are dissipation and oppression, where when you have too much freedom, you sort of just kind of like dissipate. You don't really go anywhere. Your resolve loses all sense of coherence or stability. And then when you don't have enough freedom, obviously you're oppressed, right? So there are factors that limit your ability to move within your environment and your ecology, or connect with other beings and people in your environment and ecology. Um, the stone here is a parabia tourmaline. For all of the stones, I've only chosen like royal stones. So you'll only find like things like sapphires and rubies associated with each of these spheres. The Paraiba tourmaline, or Pariba tourmaline, is a beautiful celestic, I mean, maybe even turquoise colored stone. It is really, really pretty. Check it out on your own time. These are the essentials and fundamentals. So China is the cultural association here. So Uranus is situated at the near top of our tree of life. It is to the right. The right is the objectively most eastward direction on planet Earth, right? I mean, if you're looking at it from a void. The greatest power in the East, objectively, is China. We think of great powers as a combination of every element on the tree of life. If you ask ChatGPT, for example, which nation state is the greatest power in the East, you get China as an answer. China is primarily a Buddhist nation, like other countries in the East. However, its roots, like ours, cover vast mythical traditions that bring to life popular folklore and the mechanics of their cultural engine. I found there is probably a corresponding Chinese deity for this sphere, someone within the residence of the Jade Emperor. However, we weren't bold enough to assume their station. Maybe somebody in the church could help. Could help. All right, so the limits of our knowledge. So, like, to begin this conversation, like, what exactly do we know and how much can we know, and what is knowledge when it comes to like objectivity, right? And furthermore, obviously, we make a distinction between knowledge and wisdom, where knowledge is kind of like the understanding or the concept that, you've fully like been able to not just define but interpret, and then wisdom is the application of that knowledge. How do you make waves with what you know, right? Uranus regards, yes, wisdom, but how do you get wisdom without knowledge? Well, you can't, right? So let's talk about this a little bit, right? So classically, it, once again, Uranus refers to wisdom, right? And that is not just any kind of application, but the kind that allows us to thrive, evolve, and ascend. Evolution is fundamental to this sphere. The largest aspects of its activities are based on the fact that we are meant to enter into an understanding of reality that allows us to interact with it in a very intimate way. Human beings, by nature, can only understand what is relevant to their biological focus, form, and function. Nearly everything we regard in our lives is fundamentally situated as an extension of that person. Uranus aims to the attainment or at the attainment of our ultimate destiny and final evolution on the stage of life. Still remaining human prior to crossing over to the next species on the staircase to heaven, silicone based or otherwise, right? Everyone's heard, oh, hopefully everyone's heard that, or about the speculations that the next, like the future, like the ultimate life form ends up being silicone. Like we move from carbon-based life forms like us to silicone-based life forms, which we have yet to discover, but hypothesize exist somewhere out there in space and time, right? Our future is someone else's past, maybe. So, modern marvels. So, I thought the best way to kind of like communicate the sphere was to talk about the science and the technology. Like, what exactly are we looking at here in present day, and what do we have to look forward to in the future when we see the ideal of the sphere play itself out, right? So, renewable energy is like the first kind of like starting point for us, right? So, new developments in renewable energy are making headlines and inspiring hope in communities worldwide. From a remote Arctic village working to harness solar and wind power under challenging conditions to a U.S. Air Force base planning an advanced utility scale geothermal power system. Free energy would largely change the entire landscape of civilization, making people entirely independent. And this is the next step. Obviously, we have renewable energy. Everyone knows about wind, water, solar, right? Free energy, like what Nikola Tesla is allegedly credited for actually inventing. Unfortunately, he didn't have the connections with the government to keep his idea and like sell it. The government had to take it down. But we buy into the idea of governance in society because we see the collective good that comes from working together, right? The danger of free energy regards our level of self-sufficiency and the potential we may eventually make from governing authorities, like the break we may eventually make from them. This is, that was like the failsafe that unfortunately Nicola didn't have set up during those times. So that's why that got taken away from him. Should we ever feel we no longer need society, we will need to be well equipped to make use of our lives here on Earth. And yeah, so the next kind of major idea, I mean, obviously, we're not going to talk about the mechanics of renewable energy. I'm not really sure I know them. But genetic manipulation is like the second major scientific or technological marvel of the modern age, right? Right. So the rise of gene-edited embryos has raised a myriad of ethical questions. So this along the lines of genetic manipulation, because obviously we have GMOs, that's true, genetically modified organisms that we use to eat, like or that we change for sustenance, like tomatoes and grapes. You know, they're a little bit bigger, a little bit juicier than others. We still don't really know what that's going to do to us in the future. Maybe nothing. Maybe there is no issue, right? But there are, of course, gene edited embryos that are now like talked about, right? Like designer babies. It involves altering DNA to prevent disease or even to choose specific traits using a method known as CRISPR. In 2018, Chinese scientist He Jiankui created the first gene-edited babies, making them resistant to HIV. While the process is controversial, many researchers see the potential in the technology if properly regulated. Clinical trial results demonstrate that CRISPR is safe and it's effective for treating and curing human disease, remarked Jennifer Doudna, who won the Nobel Prize in 2020 for discovering CRISPR. It's important with a powerful technology like this to grapple with the challenges of responsible use. Regulation is important, right? So we're going to need the government hands down. That's going to be the next sphere we're going to talk about next week. But for now, just I guess like let's let that soak in. Genetic manipulation isn't just something that existed in sci-fi. No, it's real. We do it now. We've been doing it for a while. Designer babies exist. This is just going to continue moving in that direction, and we're going to have to answer those ethical questions, just as it is for every other science and technology or innovation that we talk about regarding this life, right? Which is what we're trying to get at with the tree of life. Okay, so the Internet of Things. Here's another big one, right? So IoT is a network of physical objects embedded with sensors, software, and network connectivity. These smart devices, like all these different ways of connecting information through the cyber, like For example, you have Alexa, you have Google Home. There are so many different things that like connect with the network and ultimately programs that you're setting up, right? So they exchange data with other systems over the internet or local networks. Now, this is especially famous with like 5G or even specific modems, like modems talk to modems, without requiring human to human interaction, right? We imagine the evolution of this system linking together complete bodies of knowledge across every field, those stored in software specifically designed to maintain the facts of what we've determined each field to contain. So like we program specific programs, not to sound redundant, right? And we have those connect, right? So connecting to this grid would allow us to access a cybernetic repository of knowledge. We haven't quite defined like for example, like we have like the World Wide Web, right? But we don't have like very specific sites that point to like, okay, like universally, like every country gets behind this fact and that fact and that fact. Like, oh, you want to know about biology? We all have this to say. Oh, you want to know about philosophy? We all have this to say, right? Like we don't have that like necessarily designated, but in the future we probably will, right? The idea is that we're going to be connecting to the different programs and or not programs, but like structures, like information structures that we all agree upon or that the majority agree upon. Largely, some technologies are being developed, like Neuralink, to connect us to the cyber world. However, the development of IoT refers to the greater network it will be able to streamline and less so to how we connect to it or how it amplifies our capacities. That has more to do with transhumanism, which is one of the last things we'll cover during the session. So, then there's robotics and automatized labor, right? So McDonald's and other companies across industries are joining the race for a fully self-sufficient autonomous workforce. The reality is that robots are better off at performing mundane labor, where human beings are better situated to perform creative tasks. We wanted to bring in this aspect into our industries because we believe it would give us greater liberty in society. After all, if robots run the world, all we really need to do is relish their contributions and allow ourselves to enjoy the many blessings of their presence would bring us. Unfortunately, things are not that simple. The workforce must be slowly transitioned to this reality, and the people must attain an understanding that lets them enjoy their newfound freedom once they attained it. It's kind of like Sartre said, right? Like you are free. So you can do absolutely anything you want, but that's in itself kind of a curse, right? Like what do you do when you're free? Maybe you choose something that makes sense for everyone, right? But at any rate, like what would that make freedom, right? Is there a claim here like what Spinoza says about substance, about God, that like God is free, sure, like but within his own ways, right? God has a nature and God can move freely within their nature, and God doesn't know any other nature because it's God, right? So work is so fundamental to our way of life in the modern world. Many people wouldn't be able to adjust without the proper tools. In time, however, we will probably see automatized labor as the norm. And we probably will see human beings take much more creative roles in their life. So artificial intelligence, then, right? AI has boomed in recent years. It's become commonplace in both business and everyday life. People use AI every day to make their lives easier, interacting with AI-powered virtual assistants or programs. Companies use AI to streamline the production processes, project gains and losses, and predict when maintenance will have to occur. Humans disagree and allow their biases to leak through their decisions all the time. So all humans have biases, and even if we try to solve them, they sometimes manage to sneak through the cracks. On the other hand, provided the AI algorithm has been trained using unbiased data sets and tested for programming bias, the program will be able to make decisions without the influence of bias. So um, AI is still kind of new to us. It's still developing. Regulation, once again, will be really, really important to AI, especially when we talk about intellectual property and what specific productions or goods or services belong to the people instead of, say, the robots or just like it's artificial, right? Then it's destined to eventually evolve into generalized artificial intelligence, which can essentially think for itself. It kind of has a way to make sense of information within its own categorical framework, which is really, really cool. We love that. A thing about artificial intelligence that we do need to keep in mind, however, is that it's kind of like a tertiary platform for our cognition, right? What I mean to say with that is that like primary cognition happens like inside your head, right? In your brain or like in your body, in your being, right? Obviously, we're We don't just think with the brain, we also think with the stomach. We also align ourselves with our heart. And so that kind of like determines like where we're going, right? But say for example, like you have that primary reality. There's also the secondary like platform, which is like the other, right? Like another human being, your neighbor, your friend, maybe an enemy. It doesn't matter. Like they're that you'll bounce off cognition with them. They and everyone else in your environment represent like this secondary station. And then there's like the tertiary station, which is when we write like facts down or information down on something that doesn't necessarily think for itself, but we can kind of use for the purposes of shaping our own understanding, right? Or making things clear. Artificial intelligence is there, right? So it can't really think like a human being. It doesn't have those capacities. It might never have those capacities. We might be the people who we might be the way that it informs itself. Actually, when we kind of understand how it works, we might be able to give it some kind of cognition or conscience. But that is important to know. A lot of people have fears about AI. The only issues we'll really have with it probably regard regulation, right? So future Marvels, and this is where it gets really cool, right? Like this is what I mean, people have been talking about the future Marvels forever. And these things are absolutely going to happen. So once again, when we think about Uranus, innovation and evolution, like the ideal, like what exactly are we talking about when we say like science and technology and society or civilization? What are the capacities that we currently have? What are the extensions that we have through the science, through the technology? And of course, where is that going to go? Where's that ending up, right? Like what are the how is it going to evolve? How is it going to evolve, right? First of all, psionics, right? So this is something we're still exploring in modern times. There's a lot of people that maybe in mainstream academic institutions don't necessarily agree on the matter. Like there are paranormal psychological departments, like psychological departments like dedicated to like what is it, parapsych, right? Parapsychology where we talk about things like this, right? Fringe sciences. They're not very respected in the mainstream, but they still exist, and there's still work being done. Even psychedelic research into like this, the health of the healing our cognition or improving our cognition through the use of psychedelics, like in a medical context, could be really, really useful to actually developing these abilities, right? We know about them. We've known about them for a very long time. Every ancient culture talks about like it to a certain degree, right? So psionics regards our soul, right? First of all, or psych is it regards soul. It's suke from ancient Greek. It's the mind body spirit complex. That's what it's referring to in modern times, right? That's brought to life through our awareness or reason, our rationale. This construct is fundamental to all constructs in objective reality, up, right? And especially on our world where life is the most common phenomena observed. The end of our biological capacities, which include a large degree of interconnection to literally every other process in our environment, has always been tapping into and mastering the power of our soul. In other words, mastering the fullness of our being, which extends outward into the world and even further into the universe, right? So when properly understood and situated through an academic or educational program, these capacities can be fostered in a person's being. Such abilities, Latin or developed, include precognition, telepathy, telekinesis, levitation, pyrokinesis, photokinesis, astral projection or remote viewing, and the like. Surely you've probably seen them on TV. The most brilliant of all the capacities is our capacities for healing, namely quantum healing, that which occurs at the deepest level of our collective experience. Jesus Christ, for example, was someone who allegedly had that ability, right? He could touch you and heal you all together, all at the same time. So are going to be developed in the future and not outside of humanity, not outside of our own being and becoming. We're going to find a way of like developing our own abilities naturally, probably through some kind of program or again through some kind of dialectic that allows us to like secure the random or chaotic aspects of our power, which are really just like the a like massive influx of like information that doesn't necessarily always find its output, right? Uh, Oftentimes, like people who have like spiritual awakenings are like tuning their body to all of the life force around them. And you know, there's these are the kind of struggles you face in modern times. But I mean, imagine like when we actually have an institute that can kind of like help you out with this, right? Like just like a hospital, maybe even a department in the hospital. one of their wings. Okay. So, interdimensional travel, right? So, string theory tells us that there are at least seven dimensions folded into the end of our third here on Earth. So, that's like to say, like you have one, two, and three, and then four is folded into the third, fifth is folded into the fourth, the sixth is folded into the fifth, etc. Right? So, we believe the further down we go, the more complexity we obtain. The more popular modern interpretations of quantum physics places us at 11 dimensions, the same number of spheres seen in our tree of life. As far as we're concerned, life happens at each dimension. You can think of it like a Russian nesting doll, where everything is rolled into one congruent object, and that object is the collective reality we're all sharing. Things become increasingly more defined as we go down or up the dimensional overlays. At the highest level, we are cruising on the edge of the universe as a shadow of an ultimate reality that exists and will always exist above us. Traveling to these other locations would give us a way to connect with the systems and orders living out their experiences therein. Greater access brings about greater capacities for trade or exchange and ultimately a stronger civilization, right? So interdimensional travel is to work our way into the other dimensions, right? Like let's explore. Maybe this is a matter of frequency, and maybe there are things that we can learn from them, or maybe there are things they can learn from us, right? So interstellar travel, and so I use they, right? Like, so again, I just want to highlight that I'm saying life does happen on all of the dimensions. So you are in interdimensional travel, connecting with other cultures and other civilizations that exist along the continuum, just not temporally, spatially. There's interstellar travel. So everyone wants to fare the stars, right? Science has led us to the conclusion that eventually we will leave our world for others, having fully developed it and secured its success to the end of time. Not for conquering, but for continuing the work we began on Earth, stewardship and shepherding, namely, right? So wormholes, which I'm sure you guys have probably heard of at some point, right, offer us a fantastic opportunity to make these kinds of achievements possible. The idea that the fabric of space-time, intimately connected to what we embody in our person on the more subtler frequencies, can be folded and its contents allowed to shift between one end and the other. Each end embodying a different state of matter is the foundation for what will eventually allow us to travel the known universe. Oftentimes, when you see this explained in movies, like they use a physics teacher from like a high school physics teacher, and they grab a piece of paper and they fold it and they say, look, this is the universe and it's that plane, right? They fold it and they say, you are on this side and you want to get to the other side, and then they poke it with a pencil and they say, look, you did it. And that's how they explain wormholes, right? So that's how you would get interstellar travel, right? So then there's terraforming, right? So I guess not everyone knows about terraforming, but essentially it's world building, or it's kind of like sculpting the aspects of the world that you would want to see with some kind of technology, right? Assuming that our psionic abilities aren't well developed enough to have like to be able to sculpt an entire world, we would use some kind of technology, right? So we make it out of our world, or we make it to another dimension, and we find that the realm is inhospitable for life. Here's the question: what do we do? Answer: we garden. Terraforming is world building, developing the technology necessary for weather control or even physical manipulation across states, reality bending tech utilized for the sole purpose of maintaining life, or like actually creating the balance that would allow it to thrive, right? So making life possible in those realms is vital to our deep space explorations across the universe. We don't just want to give life a chance through this lens. We want to make sure it can thrive, evolve, and ascend to its final focus, form, and function, once again, where it may sit at the seat of the soul and run the affairs of their dominion without additional aid. And terraforming is one of the coolest things that you could actually like learn how to do with like your physics and your chemistry, like what you know about it as a human being, right? Like you can go to another world and literally be like, look, these specific conditions are going to not just make life possible, but they're going to make it possible for all life in that region to thrive, right? I mean, imagine if we did that here, if we developed that technology for this world, like how wonderful that would be. And eventually, of course, we will. Before we go to another world, we will be taking care of our own. That's just the way it is. So then there's transhumanism, right? So we will eventually merge, and this we talked about this earlier, right? Like this is the end of like Neuralink, for example, and it's the merger with technology, right? To become something different, not necessarily just human, right? Something greater. Um, Kind of a joke, actually, because you're still a human at that point. Just because you merge with your technology doesn't really make you any less human. You're still a human being. You just have a greater range, right? A greater scope at that too. So, while often feared, the merger will only occur at the singularity, biological and technological convergence. So it's where the development and capacities of our technology has reached the same kind of development and capacities of our biology. So it's like where our tech can do the same thing as our bio, right? This may be sooner than later, but it will definitively not occur until our technology has developed a conscience of its own that either mirrors or improves upon our own. Quantum computing and or supercomputing will have a way of attaining the long-awaited singularity. Just to be clear, the singularity has not arrived, and it will probably not arrive for many, many years. Having nothing to fear, we would plug into the tech to take advantage of the tertiary overlay without giving up anything fundamental as to what makes us human. Not necessarily cyborgs, we'd move forward with the technological edge of our extended mind. Why aren't we cyborgs at that point? Well, because whatever it is that gives technology the soul that it possesses is actually us, right? It's our contribution. It's how we collaborate with our environment and ecology. All it will ever do is either mirror us or improve upon our condition according to what pattern we've already set in motion. Let us not confuse the matters, right? So then the last kind of aspect that I want to talk about is metagenetics. This is like the definitive end of like where we're going with all of it, right? It's a scientific study of our genetic code through the overlay of various systemic associations across other domains that can co-consubstantiate the biological one. Okay, look, that's a lot of words. I know. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be so wordy. Keep it simple, stupid, right? Like, the idea is basically that you have like a meta system, right? Like there are correspondences along various different lines, and all of it boils down to your genetic code, right? Your genetics spell out the very specific expressions that you're making in life, and they are inevitably bound to different aspects of reality, fundamental aspects of reality. So by mastering metagenetics, you master reality itself. You can be the sovereign of your own dominion, if you will. So the tree of life works as a metasystem, for example, upon which one may overlay correspondences to our genetic code, the human genome. Objects like laptops, institutions like universities, and cultural mammoths like Hollywood, for example, all play into metagenetics as different elements of larger processes within this example, right? All bearing a unique and special relation to the larger reality of biological life. We may only achieve true liberation from our physical reality when we've integrated the nature of our biological system with the reality of our cultural system, that of which is based on our civilization and taken as a whole. So that's it, the end. Yeah, I hope this was like informative and interesting. I want you to at the very least be entertained, but just keep in mind now you have kind of like an idea of what the relevance here is for maybe your scientific curiosities. We are exploring a system that is in the end trying to spell out what your individual value is, or what contributions you actually make on the greatest scale, on the largest scale, right? So we are going to try to do that. That is the purpose of this material, right? So thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for attending or for watching it, obviously over YouTube, since we didn't get a chance to actually do this in person. We will be here next Saturday in person and over Zoom, of course, as well. We hope you have an amazing week, amazing weekend. We will see you later. Take care, and thank you so much.